I'm Matt Ace Guitar, and you're watching TelliCast. I'm here with Ben Teat, who is he's on the CS team responsible for basically the Chameleon changes to Community Server. So you've been with the team for...
I started just before 2.0, and at that time I worked on the integration of the file galleries into 2.0, and also some of the theme changes that we made. I mean, the difference between the 1.1 default theme and 2.0. Yeah. We worked on that, and then in 2.1 I worked on the tags feature.
Which is huge.
Yeah, and
so the tag feature has been great. And
then in 2007, most of the work I've done was on Chameleon.
Okay. So the Chameleon represents a huge change in architecture for Community Server, right? So talk about what was required to build Chameleon.
Chameleon, when we've been talking about Chameleon for probably over a year and a half. We really wanted to make theming easier than it was, and we kind of switched it around. In 2.1, we had controls that were, well, 2.1 and before, we had controls that were really specific to each page, and so if you wanted to override this page, you had to learn about that control, and that specific control had some kind of hidden features. It looked for hidden IDs. Those weren't exposed, what it was actually looking for, what it actually supported. Mm-hmm. In Chameleon, instead of having some sort of like super control for each page that completely controls how that page works, we have more general purpose controls. So that kind of the goal is to be able to take, so you have an XHTML layout page. You can take that, paste it into your master page or paste it into your ASPX page, and just where there were placeholders for data, you just put in the appropriate Chameleon control. So there's a Chameleon control for each piece of data, like each object in the CS API, instead of having a control for each page.
Right, like you were just telling me about post list, right?
Right.
So
instead of having that aggregate post list control that we had in 2.1, and then the post list control that was in for a specific blog inside the blog theme, we have one control called post list, and that detects the context that it's placed in. So if that's on a page where you're viewing, there's no group, there's no section in the context, it'll display all the posts for the blog's application. Then if you add a group ID somewhere, like on the query string, or you're inside of a group list control, then that post list identifies, oh, I'm within the context of a group, it'll display a post for the group. Then in the blog theme, since we're in the context of an individual blog, it's just going to show posts for that blog. Right. And you can go all the way down to like filtering by tags and
So basically, it's the same control for basically all those areas. So all right, so extend it a little more. If you wanted to have custom functionality, like you wanted to have say the archive list or whatever. Right. So the same thing for the archive list. Well, I guess the archive list is different.
Actually, the archive list that lists the months, mm-hmm. That's its own control, because that is its own object in the CS API. Right. But if you want to show like recent posts, that's the same control that we use to show the main post list. Right.
Except it's just going to be the titles,
right,
and possibly like how many comments were made or whatever. So same control. So that's pretty incredible. All right, so, and how does dynamic configuration fit into that?
Well, dynamic configuration works kind of with Chameleon, though it's kind of separated. Dynamic configuration is defined within the theme.config file, which is in both site themes and blog themes. And what that does is it defines options that the theme developer wants to expose to end users to allow them to customize the theme. It's completely theme specific. I mean, you don't have to use it. You can use it if you want to. And how those properties get rendered to the end user is completely up to the theme developer as well, and default values and all those types of things. But that data gets stored per theme, and for blog it's per blog and theme, so that when we render, say, a single theme, that theme, using Chameleon controls that interact with dynamic configuration, can render options. Like, say you had a dynamic configuration option to hide the recent post list. Mm-hmm. Well, the recent post list control can have a display condition set with a control to check a specific property from dynamic configuration.
Okay.
And the dynamic configuration form that gets rendered in the control panel, which is based on the options that you specify in theme.config, is automatically generated. You don't have to write the code for all those controls and to save it or anything like that. It's based on the XML format that's defined in the theme.config to outline all the properties.
So how would somebody use that?
You'd really define as a theme developer, you kind of need to decide what types of options you can or want to expose. And for each of those options, you would identify a property in the theme.config file, which is just like a property tag, which has options for like the ID, which is pretty much the name of the property that it's going to be used programmatically and throughout the theme. And then a friendly name, which can also be a resource. A description is optional. You can display images in your description. You choose the type, and we have built-in types for common basic data types as well as URL and color. And color and URL have their own default controls, like the color. If you specify a color data type, it's automatically going to display that color picker control
from the control panel.
Right. And also for URLs, you have the option to use the built-in control that we have with CS to select files from like site files or blog files. And then once that property is defined, you can reference that property using their Chameleon controls. You can also write custom code. It's just another property on CS context that gives you access to the current configuration. And you can do whatever you want. Now, in the default theme, we have a file called dynamic style.aspx, which renders another style sheet. And what that does is that gets rendered last in the style hierarchy, so anything that's defined there obviously going to override any other styles. And that pulls out values from the current configuration to override certain CSS classes that we had decided or can expose for end user customization. And that includes things like background images, colors, borders, all types of things like fonts and font sizes. And that can be extended out. You can also use the dynamic configuration properties just using regular Chameleon controls for like display conditions, or you can render the value. There's an image control that would render the image that you selected in the control panel if you had a URL property. There's a style sheet, so if you selected the URL of a style sheet, we can render that URL as a style sheet. There's the same type of flexibility that you have with Chameleon for API objects you have with properties that you've defined for your theme.
Well, so how long did it take you to do Chameleon? I know you said you were talking about it for like a year and a half.
Right, yeah. Chameleon actually took probably 3 months to do the bulk of the work, and then we made a couple tweaks, and we wanted to make sure that you could do both the implicit data binding and also do manual data binding if you wanted to. Though the default themes don't use any manual data binding; they're all implicit. Okay. We made a couple additional tweaks, a couple utility controls. If you followed my blog when I was writing the Chameleon posts, and those were in January, I think Chameleon was mostly done in November-ish, but we wanted to have a long time internally to use it and to test it out, and we were making small
Absolutely. Well, it was a huge change to community server.
And so I actually posted on my blog after those first posts for introduction a couple changes. And there are a couple other ones that I didn't cover initially, so I didn't post updates to, but we can talk about those in the future. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So you're also, to wrap this up, I guess a little bit, but you're also working on another project right now, kind of as a side gig, right? You're working on a book.
Yeah, Wyatt Prohl and I are working on a book that's just going to be about theming for community server. It's going to be based on Chameleon, and it goes through the whole process. So we're talking about like site URLs, customization, the way that URL rewriting works, Chameleon, dynamic configuration. We're going to get into writing custom Chameleon controls, custom dynamic configuration controls, which we haven't even talked about, I don't think, anywhere yet.
Right.
But you can actually create custom controls for dynamic configuration. And really just, it's going to be kind of end-to-end how to do theming.
That's going to be incredible.
Yeah, so, I mean, if you want a theme community server, this is going to be the book.
Right. Well, that's awesome. So, thanks for meeting with us, and thanks for watching, and we'll see you in about a week.